What's up everyone, Clayton here, and today we're finally back with another Skyrim build. It's been a week or so since I've done one, since I kind of took a break for Thanksgiving and stuff, but we're finally back with some more Skyrim builds. Today's build is called the Warlord or War Mistress, depending on what gender you choose, and it was a build suggested by Overlord Parkour, now Overlord PG. Not really sure why I changed his name, but whatever, it's up to him. Anyways, this build is a red guard. I think it's the best race for this. He does say Orc is pretty good, but he does make a point of Adrenaline Rush, the red guard racial ability, being pretty good for this build, since it is kind of a simple two-handed build with some cool backstory to it. The backstory for this build is that you and your clan are infamous throughout Skyrim and were raiding a village for a trade opportunity with the Stormcloaks. However, mid-raid, an Imperial garrison caught you and killed every one of your members who were there. The Imperials put you in a cart, and you kind of know the whole thing there. You were taken to Helgen. After hearing of your capture, the rest of your clan dispersed, and you kind of lost all notoriety within Skyrim. People don't really remember your name anymore, even though you're one of the best clans or most well-known clans in all of Skyrim. So for this build, you got some skills that you'd be using. Since it is kind of a simple two-handed user, there's not very many skills. So you have smithing, block, two-handed, and the optional of archery. Also, restoration is pretty good for this build because you want to be able to stay alive, so I would recommend getting some restoration points. Smithing is kind of good to be able to craft your weapons and armor. For this build, you'll be using carved Nordic stuff, so that will be through the Dragonborn DLC, and you'll be using a Nordic sword. I think it might be called a carved Nordic sword. I'm not really sure what they're exactly called, but it's in Nordic swords, the gray stuff that looks really cool. And there's actually a whole set of armor that you use that's not full Nordic carved armor, but I'll explain that in a little bit. Block is good because you have a two-handed weapon, you can block some damage. Two-handed, you gotta need it because that's the only damage ability you have. And to make sure to get the Deep Wounds perks to allow your great sword to do more critical strikes. And archery is it kind of depends on how you feel. I like archery as a option, a way of dispatching enemies that are very far away from you and you might not be able to get close to them. So I recommend using archery, and for this build, Overlord says to use a crossbow, which I kind of agree because I do think crossbows are cooler. But if you don't have the Dawnguard DLC, just go for a regular bow. So before we talk about the gameplay, let's talk about the weapon and armor you'll be using. Like I said earlier, you'll be using the Nordic Greatsword, which is the two-handed sword. And for the armor that you'll be using, is kind of a mismatch of light and heavy armor, which is why I don't really specify which one you should really go for. The armor that you'll be using is the Nordic Carved Armor, which is the chest piece, and then you'll have the Stormcloak Officer set minus the chest piece. So this would be the helmet, the gauntlets, and the boot. And it looks pretty cool and kind of matches well with the Nordic Carved Armor, and especially since you'll have like a bear head on your head, it looks really cool, so I recommend using that. And that's kind of the reason why you don't have a specific heavy or light armor. And for smithing, you might have to go down the light armor tree, even though you're using a great sword and using some heavy armor. The ancient Nordic heavy armor is actually crafted through the light armor side of the tree. So make sure you figure that out first, where you want to go through, and if you actually want to use that armor before you pick what side of the smithing tree you're actually going through. So there's not really any spells for this. There is a shout that I recommend, which is Elemental Fury. Since your greatsword is probably not enchanted, you can use Elemental Fury Shout. That allows you to swing the sword very quickly and dispatch foes very quickly. And for the gameplay, it's pretty simple. Since you are kind of part of a clan, you're kind of trying to rebuild your clan the best you can. Maybe use followers that you get along through the game and find a way to gain more followers. Maybe even build a house with the Hearthfire thing. And that way you have a base of operations for your clan that you're trying to get back together after losing all of your power after being captured. And now you can use your newfound power of being Dragonborn to maybe recruit more followers. I know this isn't really a thing that you can do in the game, but you can kind of roleplay it as you're trying to get followers in the game to like you. That way you can rebuild your clan that disbanded. One last thing before we go, we can talk about stats. I wouldn't put any points in the Magicka since you would not be using any magic skills. I would recommend putting a 75-25 split between health and stamina. That way you have a good chunk of stamina to be able to take down your foes and enough health to stay alive. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this build, and if you did, make sure to leave a like on it. And if you want your build to be featured, make sure to leave a comment down below explaining what the build is. And if you haven't checked out these two builds here, make sure to do that. And this is Clayton, signing out.